Sunspire Academy was the best school in the galaxy. Students from different planets came here to learn, each bringing their unique skills and knowledge. It was a place of competition, where the strongest, smartest, and most powerful students thrived. But among all the alien species, humans were often looked down upon. They were considered weak, slow, and not capable of surviving the harsh conditions that other species had evolved to handle. When Mark, a human from Earth, entered the academy, no one expected much. He was small compared to the tall, strong aliens, and his biology was so different from theirs that some of the students thought he wouldn't last a month. The teachers barely paid attention to him. Humans, after all, weren't known for their abilities, at least not in the way aliens were. They couldn't breathe in space without suits or survive in toxic atmospheres. They didn't have advanced telepathy, strength, or speed. But what humans had was something none of the aliens had ever expected. Something that would soon shake the foundations of Sunspire Academy. The first test was about food. It was something that every new student had to go through. The Academy's cafeteria served dishes from all across the galaxy. Some were safe, while others were dangerous. Some could even be deadly. The idea was simple. Students had to eat the food without showing any sign of weakness. It was a test of endurance and resilience. Everyone had their doubts about Mark. How could a human survive eating foods from planets with poisonous creatures, plants that could melt metal, and fruits that could burn the skin off? When Mark walked into the cafeteria that morning, he didn't hesitate. The other students watched, some amused, others curious. The alien dishes on the table were no small challenge. The first dish was a green, glowing liquid that could melt a rock in seconds. Some of the stronger students had failed it in the past, collapsing in pain. But Mark didn't even flinch. He picked up a cup, drank it, and set it down with a calm smile. The room went silent. Mark wasn't affected at all. His face didn't twist with discomfort. His stomach didn't churn. He was perfectly fine. The other students exchanged glances. Was this some kind of trick? The food had been known to kill weaker species, but Mark didn't seem fazed. The teachers looked on, confused. How was this possible? Next came a dish from the volcanic planet of HFY. It was a small, dark fruit with sharp, needle-like spikes on it. Most students hesitated to even touch it. The fruit could pierce the skin and inject toxins directly into the bloodstream. It was almost impossible to eat safely. But Mark picked it up without a second thought, took a bite, and chewed slowly. The other students watched in disbelief. He didn't seem to feel any pain, despite the fact that the toxins were known to be deadly to many species. The aliens whispered to each other. They had never seen anything like this. Mark had just eaten two of the most dangerous foods at the academy without so much as a twitch. How could this be possible? A few students tried to challenge him. One of the stronger students from a species known for their tough skin and durability took a dish filled with purple, acidic worms. His species was immune to most toxins, but even he hesitated. The worms were known to burn through most creatures' stomachs if they weren't prepared properly. With a smug grin, he dared Mark to eat them. If you can survive this, human, you might be worthy of some respect. Without saying a word, Mark grabbed the plate, took a worm, and swallowed it whole. The alien student was sure that Mark would collapse, or worse, that he would turn into a pile of ashes. But nothing happened. Mark simply looked up at the stunned aliens and smiled. "Is that it?" Mark asked, his voice calm. The other students were now wide-eyed. Something was wrong. The human had done it again. There was no sign of poison, no sign of struggle. Mark was perfectly fine. He was, in fact, thriving. The students started to whisper among themselves. There was something strange about this human. He didn't just survive, he seemed to have an advantage that no one else did. Soon, the teachers started to take notice. One of the professors, a scientist known for her sharp intellect, began to conduct tests on Mark's digestive system. She hooked him up to machines and analyzed his body's reaction to different foods. What she found shocked her. Mark's body had a remarkable ability to break down and digest almost anything. There was no explanation for it. No alien species could do this, not even the toughest ones. How was it that a human, the weakest species in the galaxy, had this incredible ability? Days passed, and Mark continued to surprise everyone. He ate foods that no one else dared to touch. He didn't just survive the tests, he excelled. The aliens started to realize that humanity was hiding something. What was it about humans that made them able to consume and survive things no other species could? As word spread across Sunspire Academy, the other students grew more and more curious. Some of them were scared. What if humans were capable of more than just surviving? What if their ability to digest anything was a sign of something far more powerful? Mark knew he was different, but he had no idea why. He only knew that his strange ability was attracting unwanted attention. There were whispers in the halls now. Some students were fascinated, while others were afraid. Mark couldn't help but wonder, what were the aliens hiding? What did they know about humans that he didn't? The truth was out there, but Mark hadn't found it yet. And with each passing day, the mystery of his abilities grew deeper. Sunspire Academy was no longer just a school for aliens. It had become the place where Mark would uncover the greatest secret of his life. A secret that would change everything. The students at Sunspire Academy were known for their strength, intelligence, and resilience. Most of them came from planets that had evolved to survive in harsh environments. They could breathe in toxic gases, walk on molten surfaces, and withstand the most extreme conditions. But there was one student who didn't belong. Mark, the human from Earth, was smaller than the aliens, and his biology was so different it seemed impossible for him to survive in the same way. Yet, every day, he proved them wrong. The Academy's cafeteria was one of the most dangerous places for new students. It was filled with strange foods from across the galaxy, some delicious, some deadly. For the first few weeks, Mark avoided most of the dishes, uncertain about what he could and couldn't eat. But one day, everything changed at IT started when Zorak, a tall alien from the planet Crows, approached Mark during lunch. Zorak had always been proud of his species' toughness. He could eat anything without even flinching, from acid-spitting plants to creatures that could burn through steel. He had seen Mark easily survive every meal so far, and something about that bothered him. Zorak couldn't understand how a human someone considered weak could handle it. That's when he decided to challenge Mark. "You think you're tough, human?" Zorak said with a grin. "I bet you can't eat the Slither Beast." Mark looked at Zorak with a raised eyebrow. The Slither Beast was a creature from the planet Virant. It was known for its acid-filled blood and spiny flesh. Even the toughest alien species struggled to consume it, and many had failed the test in the past. No one wanted to touch it. "A bet, huh?" Mark replied, his tone casual. "What are the stakes?" Zorak leaned in closer. "If you can eat it and survive, I'll admit humans are tougher than we think. But if you can't, you'll have to give up your seat at the Academy and leave." No questions asked. Mark thought about it for a moment. His first instinct was to refuse. The Slither Beast was dangerous. But then, a voice inside him told him to go for it. It wasn't about winning or losing, it was about showing everyone that humans were stronger than they thought. "I'll take your bet," Mark said, standing up. "But don't expect me to lose." The cafeteria fell silent. The alien students gathered around, their eyes fixed on Mark. Zorak's challenge was no small thing. The Slither Beast was infamous for its ability to kill any student who dared to eat it. The creature's flesh was filled with toxins, and its blood was so acidic that it could burn through metal. No one had ever dared to eat it in front of others. But now, Mark was about to. The cafeteria staff brought out the creature, its body writhing and twitching on a large silver plate. Its spines were sharp, and its skin was a dark purple, almost black. The smell was unbearable. It was as if the creature had been dipped in burning acid. The aliens who had gathered around held their breath. They all knew the risk. If Mark failed, it would be the end of him. Zorak smirked, clearly confident that Mark would back out. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked. Mark didn't answer. Instead, he reached out, grabbed the Slither Beast's flesh, and took a bite. The students gasped. Mark didn't even flinch. He chewed slowly, his eyes focused on Zorak. The taste was disgusting, a mixture of burning acid and something metallic, but Mark didn't seem affected. He swallowed, then took another bite. The students watched in disbelief. No one could believe what they were seeing. It wasn't possible. The slitherbeast's flesh had killed many aliens before. It was a test no one had ever passed. But Mark, the human, was doing it with ease. Zorak's face twisted in confusion. He couldn't understand it. His species had evolved for survival in the most dangerous environments, yet Mark, the human, was effortlessly digesting something no one else could. It was as if Mark's body was built to withstand anything. As Mark continued eating, the crowd grew more nervous. They had expected him to fail. Some even hoped he would. But now, they could see something was happening, something they didn't understand. Mark wasn't just surviving. He was thriving. Zorak's arrogance began to fade. His jaw tightened, and his eyes narrowed. He had been so sure of his species' superiority, but now he wasn't so sure anymore. He had underestimated the human. Minutes passed, and Mark finished the entire dish. He sat back, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. He looked at Zorak, who was still staring at him in shock. "Anything else?" Mark asked casually, as if eating a slitherbeast was the easiest thing in the world. The room was completely silent. No one moved. It felt as though time had stopped. The students had no words. They had all watched in awe as Mark accomplished something none of them thought possible. Zorak was the first to speak. His voice was low and filled with disbelief. How did you do that?" Mark shrugged. "I guess I'm just lucky." But inside, Mark knew it wasn't luck. It wasn't a fluke. He had no idea how he was able to do it, but he had a feeling there was something special about humans, something hidden deep inside their biology that made them stronger than anyone realized. Zorak looked at the human, his pride now shattered. He had lost the bet. There was no way around it. "You win," he said, his voice thick with frustration. "Humans are tougher than we thought." As the crowd slowly began to disperse, Mark sat back in his seat. The challenge was over, but something inside him felt different. He had proven himself, but he also knew that this was just the beginning. If he could survive the slitherbeast, what else could humans do? What other secrets lay hidden in his biology? The bet had been unexpected, but it had revealed something far more important. Mark was no ordinary human. And the aliens were beginning to realize it. The story of the bet was just the first step in a journey that would change everything. The days at Sunspire Academy were becoming more and more intense for Mark. What had started as a simple journey to learn and prove his worth was turning into something much bigger. Mark was a human, the only one of his kind at the academy, and with each passing day, he was discovering that there was more to him than anyone could have guessed, more than even he could understand. It all began with his ability to eat and digest foods that no one else could. The alien students were fascinated by him, but they were also beginning to suspect that Mark was hiding something. His ability to survive dangerous meals, perform feats of endurance that even the toughest species couldn't match, it was as if he were built to do things that no one else could. And the more the students whispered about him, the more Mark started to wonder about himself. But there was something deeper lurking beneath the surface, something he hadn't yet uncovered. One evening, as Mark walked through the quiet hallways of the academy, he overheard two professors talking. They weren't aware he was nearby. Their voices were low and full of concern. "You've seen the way he handles those tests," one of them said. "No one can survive what he's been eating. His body. It's different." "I know," the other replied. "It's like he's been designed for this. We've looked into his biology, but there's nothing in the records about a human having such capabilities." Mark froze. His heart began to race. They were talking about him. He was sure of it. The professors didn't know what to make of his abilities, and neither did he. What did they mean by designed? He wasn't some kind of experiment, was he? The next day, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He had never thought much about his past. He was just a normal human, or so he believed. He had grown up on Earth, lived a regular life until he had been chosen to come to Sunspire Academy. But those strange words from the professors kept echoing in his mind. Designed for this. Something didn't add up. That evening, Mark made up his mind. He would find out more about his past, about how he came to be the way he was. His curiosity couldn't be ignored any longer. Mark snuck into the Academy's archives later that night. The archives were filled with records on students, historical data, and files on the various species that had attended the Academy over the years. He had never seen anything about his family or where he came from. The records on humans were almost non-existent, as if his species had only just appeared out of nowhere. He sat down at one of the computers and began searching through the files. Hours passed as he sifted through endless data on alien species and their origins. But then, just as he was about to give up, something caught his eye. A file labeled Project Human. His heart skipped a beat. This had to be what he was looking for. With trembling hands, he opened the file. What he found was more than he could have ever imagined. The document was old, very old. It detailed an experiment, a project that had started long before Mark was born. The project had been designed to enhance the human race, to make them stronger, faster, and more resilient than any other species. But it wasn't just about physical changes. The goal was to create humans who could survive in any environment, on any planet. It was a secret operation, one that had been hidden from the public eye, even from other species. And then Mark saw something that made his blood run cold. Subject 12,345 Mark. His name was there, but it was followed by a series of cryptic codes and symbols that didn't make sense to him. He clicked on the next section of the file, desperate to understand more. The next page contained a detailed account of Mark's genetic modifications. It seemed that he wasn't just a regular human at all. His body had been altered from the moment he was born. His digestive system had been enhanced to break down almost anything poisonous substances, dangerous foods, even toxins that could kill other species. He wasn't just a human, he was the product of an experiment. He was a creation. Mark's mind raced. Was this the reason why he could do things no other human could? Was he an accident of science? Had his entire life been a lie? The answers didn't come easy, but one thing was clear. He wasn't just an ordinary student at the Academy. He was a living experiment, and someone, somewhere, was watching him. He couldn't sit still any longer. Mark needed answers, and he needed them fast. But as he turned to leave the archives, he heard a noise behind him. He spun around, his heart pounding in his chest. A figure stepped out from the shadows. It was Professor Rahl, one of the head instructors at the Academy. His expression was calm, but there was a coldness in his eyes. "I see you found the file," Professor Rahl said, his voice smooth and calculated. "I was wondering how long it would take you." Mark stood frozen, unable to speak. He had been caught, and now there was no way out. "What do you mean?" Mark finally asked, his voice shaky. "What is this? What am I?" Professor Rahl took a step forward. "You're the result of a very important project, Mark. One that has been kept secret for years. You're not just a human, you're the next step in human evolution. The enhancements you've undergone were designed to make you perfect. But there's more, Mark. You were chosen for a reason. Your abilities aren't random. They are a key to something much larger." Mark felt his breath catch in his throat. "What do you mean?" "Why me?" Professor Rahl smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The real question, Mark, is not why you. The question is, what are you going to do with your abilities? Will you be the tool they want you to be, or will you choose your own path?" Mark's mind spun. His whole life had been a lie, and now he was standing on the edge of something he couldn't even begin to understand. What did it all mean? And who was really controlling his fate? The truth was finally starting to surface. But Mark knew that this was only the beginning. The more he uncovered, the more dangerous the answers would become. And he had to make a choice, one that could change everything. Mark sat in the dimly lit room, his mind racing with the revelations he had just uncovered. The pieces of his past were falling into place, but the picture that was forming was more unsettling than he could have imagined. He was part of an experiment project human. His entire life had been shaped by someone's hidden agenda, and now, standing at the edge of the truth, Mark didn't know where to turn. He had learned from Professor Rail that his enhancements were no accident. His body had been carefully modified from birth, not to make him stronger for his own sake, but for something else entirely. The professor's cryptic words echoed in his mind. Your abilities are the key to something much larger. But what did that mean? Who was behind all of this, and why had they chosen him? The answers were locked away somewhere in Sunspire Academy, but Mark knew he couldn't trust anyone. His life had been manipulated by forces he couldn't understand, and now he was a part of a game he hadn't even known he was playing. The next day, as he walked through the corridors of the academy, Mark's thoughts were clouded with suspicion. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. The hall seemed emptier than usual, the students quieter. There was a tense energy in the air, as if everyone knew something he didn't. Mark tried to focus on his classes, but he couldn't stop thinking about the hidden files he had found in the archives. What other secrets did Sunspire Academy hold? What had he gotten himself into? Later that evening, he made his way to the quietest part of the academy, the old library. It was a place few students ever visited, and Mark hoped it might provide some answers. The library was filled with ancient texts from every corner of the galaxy. The shelves were stacked high, each book a window into another world. He had a feeling that the answers he sought were hidden among the pages. He began searching the library for anything that might give him more information about Project Human. Hours passed as he flipped through pages, but most of the books were either too old or too obscure to help. Just as he was about to give up, something caught his eye. It was a book that looked out of place, its cover worn and faded. It had no title, only a strange symbol etched into the front. Mark hesitated for a moment before pulling it from the shelf. He opened the book, and the first page made his stomach drop. It was a detailed account of Project Human, the same project Professor Rail had mentioned. But this time, the details were more specific. The document explained how the project had been designed not just to enhance humans, but to create a new type of soldier, one who could survive on any planet, in any environment, and one who could be controlled. Mark's breath caught in his throat. He wasn't just an experiment, he was a weapon. The book went on to describe how humans like him were being created for a purpose tied to the rise of a new galactic empire. The project had been secretly funded by a group of powerful beings who wanted to build an army of enhanced humans to conquer and control other species. The modifications were designed to make humans more powerful, more resilient, and ultimately more obedient. Mark was just one piece of a much larger puzzle, but there was something else, something even more unsettling. The book revealed that Mark was not the only one. There were others like him, scattered across the galaxy, each one enhanced and trained for a purpose they couldn't yet understand. Mark slammed the book shut, his heart racing. He couldn't believe what he was reading. All these years, he had thought he was just a regular human, but now he understood the truth. He had been created for a mission he had no say in. He had been designed to follow orders, to fight in a war that wasn't his to fight. But Mark couldn't accept that. He wouldn't be a pawn in someone else's game. ASE turned to leave. A shadow moved across the doorway. Mark froze. He wasn't alone. A figure stepped into the room, Professor Rail. I knew you would find it, the professor said, his voice calm, almost resigned. You're smarter than I thought. Mark backed away, clutching the book in his hands. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me the truth? Professor Rail's expression didn't change. I didn't have a choice. You were never meant to know. The project was meant to remain a secret until the time was right. Time for what? Mark demanded. What do you want from me? Rail stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. You are part of a plan, Mark. A plan that will change the galaxy. You were created to lead the charge, to bring the human race to the forefront of the galaxy's future. You're stronger than any of the species here, and that's exactly why you are so important. Mark's mind was spinning. I won't be a part of this. I won't let you control me. Rail's gaze softened, almost sadly. It's not up to you, Mark. You were born for this. You were made for it. There's no turning back now. Mark felt a chill run down his spine. He had no idea who these people were or what they wanted from him. But one thing was clear. They were powerful, and they had been pulling the strings behind his entire life. "You don't have to do this," Mark said, his voice shaking with anger. "I'm not a weapon. I'm not your soldier." Professor Rao's expression remained unreadable. "We'll see about that, won't we?" Mark's heart pounded. He could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on him. The academy wasn't just a school, it was a training ground for something much larger. And he had just learned that he was at the center of it all. Mark turned and fled from the library, the book still clutched tightly in his hands. The walls of Sunspire Academy felt like they were closing in on him. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: he wasn't going to let anyone control him. Not now, not ever. But as he raced through the halls, he couldn't shake the feeling that the forces behind the secret agenda were closer than ever before. And soon, he would have to face them head-on. The air was thick with tension. Mark stood in the center of the vast metallic arena. This was it, the moment he had been dreading ever since he discovered the truth about Project Human. The Academy had led him to this point, but Mark had no idea what lay ahead. All he knew was that this final test would determine everything: his future, his freedom, and whether he could escape the hidden agenda that had controlled him for so long. The arena was unlike anything Mark had ever seen. Towering walls surrounded him, and the floor was a smooth, shiny surface that seemed to hum with energy. On all sides, students and faculty filled the stands, watching him with a mixture of curiosity and fear. They knew what was coming, and Mark was the one who would face the far end of the arena. A massive door slid open with a grinding noise. From the darkness beyond, something emerged, a creature so terrifying it made Mark's blood run cold. It was the size of a building, covered in scales that shimmered with an eerie glow. Its eyes glowed bright red, and its massive claws scraped against the floor as it moved toward Mark. The creature was the ultimate test, a being from the depths of space, designed to push his abilities to the limit. No one had ever survived it. Mark's breath hitched as he realized the true nature of the test. It wasn't just about surviving the creature, it was about proving his worth, proving he was ready to fulfill the mission the Academy had planned for him. "Begin," a voice crackled through the speakers, and before Mark could even react, the creature lunged toward him with terrifying speed. Mark barely had time to dodge as its claws slashed the air, missing him by mere inches. He could feel the heat of its breath on his skin, the stench of sulfur and decay filling the air. This was no ordinary beast. It was a living nightmare, and Mark was its prey. His body moved on instinct. Years of training he hadn't even known he was receiving kicked in. Mark wasn't just running. He was calculating, analyzing the creature's every move, studying its patterns. It was as if his mind was working faster than ever before, processing information at a speed he couldn't explain. The creature roared again, its massive jaws snapping at him. Mark dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the beast's teeth. He rolled to his feet, his heart racing, but there was no time to hesitate. The creature was circling him now, its glowing eyes fixed on him like a predator sizing up its prey. Mark's mind flashed back to the file he'd found in the library, the one that detailed Project Human. The enhancements, the genetic modifications, all of it was coming into focus now. This test, this impossible challenge, was designed to force him to tap into every ounce of power he had. He wasn't just fighting to survive, he was fighting to prove that he was more than just an experiment, more than just a weapon. The creature lunged again, and this time, Mark was ready. He dodged, but he didn't just avoid the attack, he moved in with lightning speed, striking the creature's exposed flank with a blow that sent it reeling back. The force of the impact shook the arena, and the audience gasped. Mark had never felt anything like it. The strength in his body, the speed of his movements, it was as if he was more than human, as if he were something else entirely. The modifications, the enhancements, everything was coming together. He was stronger than he had ever imagined. But the creature wasn't finished yet. It let out a roar of fury and charged again, this time more aggressively. Mark's heart raced, but he didn't falter. He could feel the energy building inside him, a surge of power that seemed to come from deep within. His body was pushing beyond its limits, and he was ready to unleash everything he had. The creature struck, but Mark was faster. He moved with a fluid grace, dodging and weaving as he closed the distance between them. With a roar of his own, he launched himself at the creature, his fist connecting with its skull in a bone-crushing blow. The creature staggered, its eyes going dim as it collapsed to the ground, defeated. The arena was silent. The students and faculty stared in shock, unable to comprehend what had just happened. No one had expected this. No one had believed a human could defeat the creature. Mark stood there, panting, his body covered in sweat and blood. His chest heaved as he tried to catch his breath, but his mind was already racing. He had won, but at what cost? He had tapped into something inside him that felt both powerful and dangerous. It was as if there was a part of him he didn't fully understand, a part that had been unlocked by this test. For a moment, the silence stretched on, broken only by the sound of Mark's breathing. Then, slowly, the crowd began to stir. A few students whispered among themselves. Others exchanged wide-eyed glances. The professors in the stands looked at each other, unsure of what they had just witnessed. Mark's victory had been unexpected, but the questions it raised were even more unsettling. How had he done it? What did it mean for his future? And, most importantly, what did the Academy want from him now? Before he could process his thoughts, a voice came over the speakers. It was Professor Rao. "Congratulations, Mark," the professor's voice echoed in the arena. "You have passed the final test. But this is only the beginning. The true mission is yet to come." Mark's heart skipped a beat. What mission? What was he supposed to do now? The creature's lifeless body lay at his feet, and the weight of his victory began to settle in. He had survived the impossible, but he knew this was just the beginning of something much larger. The Academy had been preparing him for something far beyond this test. As Mark stood there, his mind racing with unanswered questions, he realized one thing: the hardest part of his journey was just beginning.